The capital asset pricing model is one of the most important frameworks in finance for understanding the relationship between risk and return. First, we'll analyze the formula with a stock example, then discuss its benefits, and finally its limitations. Part 1. What is the capital asset pricing model? 1990. Incredibly, this would be the year William Sharpe won the Nobel Prize after developing CAPM in the early 1960s. Fast forward to today, and the top 3 biggest asset management companies, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, all use the model to help with risk management. The main objective of the model is to answer a simple but fundamental question: how much return should an investor expect for taking on a given level of risk? The model states that investors should be compensated in 2 ways. First, the time value of money is simply about delaying consumption, and secondly, for taking on risk that cannot be avoided through diversification. The greater the unavoidable risk, the higher the return investors should demand. The capital asset pricing model is built around the concept of systematic risk, also called market risk. This is the type of risk that affects almost all investments simultaneously through events such as recessions, interest rate changes, inflation shocks, geopolitical news, and more. Unlike company-specific risk, systematic risk cannot be diversified away. No matter how many stocks an investor owns, market-wide movements still affect the portfolio. The model assumes that rational investors diversify sufficiently, meaning they should be rewarded only for the unavoidable market risk. The model therefore creates a linear relationship between risk and expected return. The lower the risk, the lower the required or expected return, and the higher the risk, the higher the expected return. The capital asset pricing model is expressed as the risk-free rate plus beta multiplied by the market risk premium. Next, we'll break down the components to help you understand them. Firstly, the expected return is the return an investor should require from holding an asset over the long term, given the asset's risk profile. It is not a guarantee, but rather a benchmark used to judge whether an investment offers adequate compensation for risk. Next, there's the risk-free rate represents the return an investor can earn without taking on any meaningful risk. In practice, this is usually approximated using government bond yields. Most analysts default to long-term government bonds, such as the US 10-year Treasury. The main reasons are that they are highly liquid, which means they are easy to buy or sell. They reflect long-term expectations while being considered the safest benchmark available. Ideally, the risk-free rate should match both the currency of the investment and its time duration. Beta measures how sensitive an asset is to movements in the overall market. The overall market is usually measured by the S&P 500, which has a beta of 1. Think of it like a risk thermostat, showing how much a stock moves in response to market swings. A beta greater than 1 means it is more volatile or riskier than the market, while a beta less than 1 means it is more stable and less risky than the market. There's also a negative beta, which means it moves opposite to the market, which gold often does. For example, a stock with a beta of 1.3 is expected to rise 13% if the market rises 10% and fall more sharply when the market declines. Importantly, beta captures only systematic risk, not company-specific risk, because it assumes investors can eliminate unsystematic risk through diversification. Next, we have the market risk premium, which is the extra return investors expect from holding the market portfolio rather than a risk-free asset. It's calculated by subtracting the risk-free rate from the expected market return. This figure shows the compensation investors demand for bearing overall market uncertainty. There is no universally accepted market risk premium, as estimates vary depending on data, time periods, and methodology. Now we know all the components, let's look at a simple example. Let's assume the risk-free rate is 2.5%. The expected market return is 10%. The market risk premium is 7.5%. And lastly, the stock beta is 1.25. Now let's put those figures into the CAPM formula as shown here with 2.5% plus 1.25 multiplied by 7.5%. As a result, the expected return is 11.9%. Therefore, according to the formula, an investor should require a return of 11.9% per year to justify holding this stock. But if the expected return is lower than that, the investment may not sufficiently compensate for its risk. Part 2. The benefits of capital asset pricing model and the security market line. Despite its simplicity, it plays a critical role in corporate finance and valuation. Most importantly, it is used to estimate a company's cost of equity, which is then used to calculate the weighted average cost of capital. The weighted average cost of capital is a foundational input in discounted cash flow analysis, net present value calculations, and equity and enterprise valuation. Because of this, CAPM is deeply embedded in professional financial modeling, despite analysts acknowledging its imperfections. If you're learning something new, please consider clicking the like button and subscribing so you don't miss out on more videos like this. Next, let's look at a key part of the model, which is the security market line. Basically, it's a graph that illustrates the capital asset pricing model by plotting an investment's expected return against its systematic risk. As a result, it's a useful tool for seeing if an investment offers an appropriate expected return for its risk level. Another popular name for it is the characteristic line. It's a way of visualizing CAPM, with the x-axis of the chart showing beta or risk, and the y-axis shows the expected return. The line begins with the risk-free rate of return, meaning the expected return for an investment with no volatility or risk, for example a US Treasury bill. The slope shows the market risk premium, which is the market return minus the risk-free rate. The higher the slope, the higher the risk, or beta, and therefore the investment should demand a higher expected return. The opposite is true if the slope is downward. To understand the security market line, you need to know that securities above the line are undervalued, meaning they have an expected return higher than their risk. The opposite is true for below the line, which shows it's overvalued. And lastly, if it's on the line, then it's fairly priced with the intercept showing the risk-free rate. The formula for the expected return is the risk-free rate plus beta multiplied by the market return minus the risk-free rate. This tool can be useful for many investors and portfolio managers to help identify mispriced assets by comparing projected returns to required returns based on market risk. Next, in part 3, we'll look at the main pros and cons. Despite its popularity in the corporate world, the capital asset pricing model still has limitations and assumptions we must be aware of. Firstly, it assumes that markets are efficient and investors are rational and risk-averse. Also, it assumes investors can perfectly diversify to avoid risk from a single company and can only take on market or systematic risk. Next, it assumes all investors' expectations are equal and does not account for taxes or transaction fees. And lastly, it uses a single period investment duration, which makes it unsuitable for multi-period investment appraisals. The weaknesses are well documented, but you must also be aware of the model's main technical weaknesses before using it. Firstly, beta is an imperfect risk measure. Research by Eugene Farmer and Kenneth French found that beta alone does not reliably explain differences in returns. Problems with beta include instability over time because no standard time frame is set. Also, it relies on historical data, which may not accurately reflect future risk. And lastly, it only considers market risk, not company-specific risks like management and company fundamentals. That leads us to the next point, which is that market risk premium is hard to estimate. Small changes in the assumed market risk premium can significantly alter expected returns. There is no consensus on the correct value. The third main point is that it's easy to use unrealistic assumptions because it assumes perfectly efficient markets. However, real markets have taxes, transaction costs, behavioral biases, borrowing constraints, and unequal access to information, all of which violate CAPM assumptions. Also, factors such as company size, value, profitability, and momentum influence returns, but the model doesn't consider them. These shortcomings led to the development of alternative models such as the Farmer-French three-factor model and arbitrage pricing theory. However, despite its flaws, it remains very popular among major investment companies such as Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. So why is that? Let's look at its main pros to find out. Essentially, it's simple, intuitive, easy to communicate, and consistent with portfolio theory. In practice, CAPM is best viewed as a baseline or reference point and not a precise forecasting tool. It's an effective comparison tool. It helps investors check return assumptions, compare investments on a risk-adjusted basis, and understand why higher returns require higher risk. It provides a quick and clear way to compare investments based on their risk-adjusted returns. Estimating the cost of equity is very helpful, as it helps companies calculate the appropriate discount rate for capital budgeting projects. Additionally, it is versatile and can be used for simple stress testing by adjusting input variables such as the market return or risk-free rate to see how the required return changes across scenarios. The capital asset pricing model clearly and intuitively links expected returns to systematic risk. While its assumptions are quite unrealistic and its predictions imperfect, The model remains key for big corporations when estimating the cost of equity and evaluating investment opportunities. Big corporations often use CAPM to determine the required return shareholders expect, which is a vital part in calculating the weighted average cost of capital. Companies will use the model to estimate the appropriate discount rate or project-specific cost of equity to see if a project will generate sufficient returns. And lastly, is used in valuation analysis to find out the expected return and risk of assets or potential investments. It provides a structured, data-driven way of valuation which big companies like. Although the model has been heavily debated and criticized over the years, it remains a cornerstone of finance education, portfolio theory, and professional valuation work. The model was developed in the 1960s by William Sharpe, who won the Nobel Prize in 1990 for it. He developed it along with Jack Traynor, and later John Lintner and Jan Mossen extended it further in the mid-1960s. It was built on the foundation of Harry Markowitz's modern portfolio theory. Used wisely and alongside other models, CAPM still provides valuable insight into the trade-off between risk and reward. I use it occasionally to evaluate investment opportunities, and I recommend you look into it further. It was a fairly complex topic, so if you're confused about anything, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll try my best to help you. This video explaining earnings per share is very useful because it's one of the most important metrics you must know about, so watch it next. Also, please consider clicking the like button and subscribing if you found value from the video. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.